Russian occupiers have significantly increased security measures on the Crimean Bridge because they are afraid of certain actions from the Ukrainian special services. As Dmitry Pletenchuk, a representative of the Ukrainian Navy, said on the air of the telethon, the number of inspection groups has been increased and the inspection itself has been intensified. According to the military man, even the Russians themselves complain about the meticulous inspection. Illegal Russian tourists say that they are completely undressed. The inspection is quite picky because the Russians are afraid of possible actions from our special services. In addition, this is due to the increase in the flow of transportation to Crimea on the eve of the season. Of course, no explosions can scare Russian tourists away from Ukrainian Crimea. You will also see how they will step over stains of fuel oil on the beaches of Anapa this year, Pletenchuk emphasized. He also added that the occupiers have effectively turned Crimea into a military base, which means the location of logistics, the placement of personnel, and a large number of specific military facilities. We should not forget that they use Crimea to strike the territory of Ukraine with ballistics. That is, the Iskander's MS, as a rule, operates from the territory of the temporarily occupied Crimea, Pletenchuk said. According to him, the Russians do not spare any means of defense on the peninsula. Crimea is densely packed with various systems, a real zoo, as the military calls it, of the most diverse means, and the means of location and weapon guidance are no less important than the weapon itself, because without eyes, the launchers have no special value. Therefore, when the Russians lose a certain number of these eyes, this is very, very important for us. The speaker noted. Let us recall that on March the 19th, the Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed the occupiers in Crimea. In particular, an Mi-8 helicopter, 3 anti-aircraft missile and gun systems, Pantsir S-1, a transport and tugboat of the S-4236 project, the tug Fedor Uryupin, a helicopter, command posts, 13 radar stations including Castor 2E2, 9S-19 Imbia, Nebo SV and others were destroyed. It was also reported that Russia is training mercenaries in Crimea. In particular, we are talking about mercenaries from Cuba, a number of African countries and other states that support the Russian Federation. According to intelligence, Russian special services travel around the world to recruit foreigners. Freezing the current front line in Ukraine would leave it vulnerable to another attack, Business Insider reports. Experts warn that the freeze would likely be a prelude to future conflict rather than a long-term solution. This is especially true without US security guarantees or sufficient international peacekeepers to monitor and respond to renewed Russian aggression, the report says. There are few naturally defensible positions between the front lines and key strategic targets, meaning the temptation for Russia to violate the ceasefire and take advantage of Ukraine's fragile defensive situation will be high. RAND Europe senior fellow Bryden Sperling said the further west the front line goes, the worse it is for Ukraine, given the concentration of strategic and economic power centers near the front. He said Ukraine will seek to draw the line to take advantage of geography that gives its defenders an advantage. The US Council on Foreign Relations concluded that Ukraine could effectively defend itself by creating a layered territorial defense system that would include a hardened perimeter defense, rapid reaction forces, and enhanced protection of cities and critical infrastructure. Experts estimate that this would require about 550,000 active Ukrainian troops and 450,000 in reserve, and would cost between $20 billion and $40 billion a year. To deter another Russian attack, Ukraine would need to establish extensive defensive lines of mines, trenches and artillery, and guard them with enough troops to slow the advancing forces and move more resources, the publication notes. It is emphasized that Russia can use a period of several months to restore its reserves. Whatever form a ceasefire takes, any deal that freezes the current front line is unlikely to hold, said Stefan Wolf, Professor of International Security at the University of Birmingham in the UK. He believes a strong enough security guarantee from countries like the US could act as a deterrent to Russia. If Ukraine is properly armed and given some security guarantees, even poorly fortified lines can become more defensible simply because of the price Ukraine can impose on Russia in the future. Sperling agreed. If Europe or the US were indeed prepared to provide real support in the event of a renewed conflict by Russia, this would create a serious strategic dilemma for any future Russian ambitions in Ukraine and would greatly increase Ukraine's ability to withstand any new invasion. Experts say that for a common victory, Ukraine must inflict 3 times more losses on Russia. Back in December 2023, the head of the Estonian Ministry of Defense stated that in order to defeat the Russian Federation in 2024, the Ukrainian armed forces must eliminate about 100,000 enemy soldiers. Forbes reports. According to the results of last year, the Ukrainian armed forces killed and wounded more than 200,000 soldiers of the Russian armed forces, which is twice as much as Tallinn considered necessary. According to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, in 10 weeks of 2025, Putin's army lost up to 100,000 servicemen on the battlefield. According to the Estonian theory of victory, Ukraine can defeat Russia by destroying more well-trained troops than the Russian military training system can replace, thereby initiating a gradual military collapse. Military experts say the Kremlin can train 130,000 new recruits every 6 months, but not all of them go straight to the front. If the Kremlin only trains 40,000 new recruits every 6 months, it will force Russia to throw untrained soldiers into battle. As a result, the quality of Russian forces will deteriorate. From 2022 to 2023, the Ukrainian armed forces sent an average of 172,000 enemy soldiers to the next world every year. By the end of 2024, 210,000 of Putin's soldiers were killed and wounded. So why hasn't the Russian military collapsed? The answer may be that it is collapsing, but very slowly. Analysts recall that the year-long offensive of the Russian armed forces in Donbass stopped in February. Or perhaps it is because Russia is finally running out of well-trained troops and, as a result, losing the ability to mount meaningful offensive actions on a large scale, as analysts in Tallinn had predicted. However, the Ukrainian armed forces also suffer losses. As a result, the situation on the battlefield will again reach a dead end. There will be a picture of 2 exhausted armies inflicting softer and softer blows. Such a dead end would ultimately benefit Russia, Frontelligence Insight explained. This is because Ukraine has 38 million people, while Russia has 144 million. Ukraine must weaken the Russian army faster than Russia weakens the Ukrainian army. At present, the ratio of losses is in Ukraine's favor, but not enough, given the large human reserves of the Russian Federation. Losses on the battlefield should be in the ratio of 1 to 3 and 1 to 1.86. By killing, maiming or forcing to desert 3 Russians for every soldier they lose, the Ukrainians could deplete Russia's most important resource, its people. To achieve such results, Ukraine will continue to need military support from the West.